This is Passion for Your Passions, a podcast where we talk about the things that make us who we are. I'm Krista.
And I'm Julie. Today we are discussing writing for National Novel Writing Month, or as we like to say, NaNoWriMo.
Right, more.
Right, more.
We were trying to think of a funnier cereal name. The favorite options so far include Honey Bunches of Sadness, Oat Bung, and Swastikos.
Fruit Lupus.
Dingleberries.
Fart nuggets.
That's really great.
I'm gonna type every word I know. Rectangle. America. Megaphone. Monday. Butthole.
Okay, so I was really excited to go to the Wool Festival, and I've been excited for like 3 years. It turns out it was just a suburban churchy hell, and I hated every second of it. it was like 3 rows of fair food, and then a handful of sheep, and a whole bunch of really dumb home welcome with the pumpkin sign kind of shops. Like every shop had something like that, where it was like a pillow with plaid that said love, or like the stupid snowball signs. Like,
wait, where does the wool come in?
it really doesn't.
How can it be a wool festival?
This is what it turned into. Like, I think it was probably more like a fair with that, like, farmers and stuff had, so they could sell some of the product, because there was some yarn there, but in, like, percentage-wise, that was, like, less than 5% of the shops.
I bet what happened was that this was somebody's, like, passion project. They were like, I'm gonna make a wool festival. They made it, maybe didn't get as much interest as they wanted, and then they gave up, and then somebody else was like, you know what? This is a good time. So then they took over and just
Well, I think it was one. I was literally like one of 3 women that wasn't exceedingly overweight there. So I got stared at a lot, and I was just like, seriously? And I was like, oh, it's because there were no vegetables that weren't deep fried in sight. Like, it was all just junk food, and then all the performances were like churches. I'm like, I really need to make an announcement that I'm like not totally straight and also atheist, and I'll get mobbed and murdered. Like, just straight up. It was a rough time.
also go up and be like, I like metal music.
I listen to the devil's music.
I'm sorry, just pick up the microphone.
I'm not sorry.
I don't want to be here. I've made a huge mistake.
I made a huge mistake. Yeah, it was rough. And what was funnier is I went with my boyfriend, and he was wearing a jersey for like the Ireland soccer team, and nobody understood what that meant. Which I'm like, you guys watch football. I would assume you would associate. No, they're incapable of doing that. People kept asking him if he played for the Irish, as if he just, you know, this world-renowned soccer player is just going to be hanging out of this, like, fatty fest, and then they would get confused. They're like, oh, so you're from Ireland. I mean, like, heritage-wise, like, why is this so hard for you people? It was so strange.
Was this around, like, here in the land of the corn, or
It's a little south of the corn.
South of the corn. Okay. Okay, I can believe that.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was just, it blew my mind. I felt so pretty that day, though. I'm just like, damn.
Well, this story gets to be a prequel for our next episode, because in our next episode we're talking about sheep, but we're not talking about sheep this episode, so this is just a sad...
NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, write more. That's what today's topic is. Which, okay, I think maybe I said this in the intro, maybe I didn't, that for the longest time I saw this. NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo? I legitimately had no idea what that was. Like, I knew it had to do with writing. I knew it happened in November. I think I assumed that one of the things probably stood for November, but then all the rest of it, I was like, I have no idea. Is this some Japanese thing? I know nano. I'm not sure.
Miyokune? What?
Yeah. But no. NaNoWriMo, I guess, stands for National Novel Writing Month. And because this episode is going to come out in November, that is when we chose to talk about this.
Yeah. NaNoWriMo.
Because Julie and I are going to participate as well as we can, because it's a hefty goal.
I thought about it, and I was like, how many words do I write in, like, my typical session? Like, not a long one, not a short one, just a typical, like, writing session I go through. And I think it's not even 1,000. I was like, fuck! It's gonna be hard.
Yeah, it's
that's like 2,000 words a day. Like, almost, not exactly, but
yeah, it's rough.
Shit.
You just put it down.
You just get it.
Any word that comes in your head, you're like, yep. So, do we want to talk about the second reason as to why we're talking about this? It's not just NaNoWriMo.
I don't know.
Okay. No. It's because this is one of my big passions.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, what's happening? I'm scared. Like,
I'm going to draw something on you.
I was like, I don't understand. Okay.
Which, to be fair, I guess I did kind of drop that on you at one point in a startling way. And it was funny because my husband was there and I was like, hey, I gotta tell you something. And then he was like, oh, wait a minute, Julie, it's not what you think it is, Julie. She's just gonna talk to you about how she wrote a book.
Yeah.
That's it.
I was just like, oh, okay. I was like, thought you were dying, or you got really serious. It was out of nowhere, and I'm just like, what's happening?
Yeah, I'm just dying.
Yeah. It's like, are we pregnant, dying? But I'm not sure.
No, when I first started writing again, I wasn't really telling anybody about it. Like, I basically wasn't telling anybody at all. So I like got to the point when I wrote the book and I was like, I should tell people about this. This is a weird thing to not tell people about. So, because this is a big passion of mine and because it's November, I thought, why not talk about it on Passion for Your Passions, the thing we do.
We talk about our hobby. I'm about to repeat the intro. This is a podcast where we talk about our hobbies and things that make life worth living. We're talking about writing today, everybody. Yeah, writing's definitely been something Krista has always done. I distinctly remember that. And you've encouraged everybody else in your vicinity to write. Because I will be completely honest, I did not give a shit about writing until I would see you write all the time. And I was just like, well, I want to bond with you on things. So I started writing.
I love how that's a major part of your story.
Yeah.
This is like, I want to bond with Krista.
Well, do you remember, I can't remember what they called it, but it was in elementary school. They made us write a book every year, like this stupid little, we had to draw the artwork on the front. Something that's definitely you. But essentially, I did one the year before you and I were friends. And it was complete horseshit. It was just me going like, they're making me do this. And I just like wrote about cats or something really ridiculous. And then the following year, I saw like you get into it and you like went all out in the art. You went all out in the story. And I'm like, oh, you care about this. I just throw something together. I literally made a story. I remember my story because when I started writing, my mom teased me. She's like, I know you don't give a shit about writing. She's like, you know how I know? It's because that stupid fucking book you wrote in 6th grade. I went, what? And she said, yeah. You heard someone, like, in a movie or something, someone talk about a weeping willow, and you didn't know it was a tree. And so you just made up this really dumbass story about, like, a girl named Willow weeping somewhere. And then you found out, like, you talked to me about it, and I went, that's a tree. And just at the end, you went, and then she turned into a tree, and that's where it came from. I'm like, that's hella creative, Mom. I don't know what you're talking about.
I think the thing that I always think about with the two of us is, I don't know, I think she was like our 6th grade teacher. You remember when, I don't even remember what the assignment was, but we wrote like this story and like the purpose of it was like to be as weird as possible. And I think like for some reason we wanted to like prank our teacher. I'm not really sure exactly what the point was, but like we made it so ridiculous and then we handed it to her and we're just like, ha, ha. And then she was like, basically like, oh, okay. And we were like, no, we actually did the assignment.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now. We did the assignment and then we wrote the most bullshit nonsense we could possibly think of. and then handed that to her, and then, yeah, like, literally a second later went, no, he didn't. He couldn't handle not possibly getting a good grade on it because we put so much effort into the prank that didn't really work.
And I really, like, honestly, to tell you the truth, I could not remember.
I don't remember
what the prank was. Like, what it was about, why we thought it was a good idea to go through with this prank, or, like, and then why we backed away from it. I think really we backed away from it because, like, you could tell the teacher, like, immediately was like, okay. Like, she took it seriously. We were like, wait a minute.
We thought you knew we were smart and wouldn't do that.
So, yeah, I think one thing I just kind of wanted to talk about, this was kind of our first thing, because, I mean, we're kind of reminiscing now, but just why did I start writing? Julie says I always did. I don't really remember myself as always writing. I know for sure, especially when I was younger, I was a very avid reader. Like, I read all the time. It was definitely part of my identity. I spent a lot of time in libraries, which I feel sounds somewhat suspicious, but I did. I spent a lot of time in libraries. I think, so that one's actually kind of weird. The reason why I spent so much time in libraries is because I got into a lot of situations where nobody was able to pick me up until a certain time. So it's like, just take Krista to the library, she'll be there, and that's safe. So I was just...
See, I just got left places or, like, sent home anyway.
Well, so that was fine, except for once I started doing a lot of theater. Because that would be literally, like, I would just be sitting outside. Like, there was nowhere for me to be.
My mom literally forgot me a couple times at the school. So, it was before, I think it was, like, that's why I got a cell phone before everyone else did, because they were like, I'm going to keep forgetting her on the curb at the middle school. Like, you need to get that girl a cell phone.
No, mine was just more, nobody could come get me, so then if not, I'd just be trapped outside school, because I don't know why. Our school was kind of weird about this.
They did not want you in there.
Yeah. I guess it's because nobody was around. Maybe that's what the reason was, but, like, when it got to 5 o'clock, there was nobody, and so they'd kick you out. And then you would just be stuck outside the school with nowhere to go. Like, there's not really, like, a great place to, like, sit and do homework. There's no shelter if it's snowing or whatever.
Slept on the curb.
So that was why I spent a lot of time in libraries. I mean, I definitely started reading a lot before then, but I think by that time it was a definite part of my personality. And I think, like, because of that, because, like, I read so much, and I did read a lot, like, especially when I spent time at libraries, like, I got into the habit of just, like, I would just pick up a book and just read it. Which I feel like in some ways kind of sounds like a fantasy, but I would do that. And I think after a while, I just really liked it. It was one of those things where I started caring about stories, and I started caring about all of that, and so I wanted to write.
Create your own stories for the world to hear.
Yeah. Not just read about it in anime. I did read a lot of anime. Or manga. Sorry,
nerds.
I don't know if we're gonna talk about that here, but I read a lot of manga when I was a kid.
I don't think I've read a single book of manga. That was never a thing in my life.
It was weird, especially when I was younger, because so if you read mangas at the library, and I don't even know if this is still really a thing, but you never read them in order, because they would never have things, like, they would have 5. You see, you read whatever the 5 were, and so you maybe never got to read the ending, or the beginning, or that random one, and it would never be there. Never, ever. So you had to make a lot of very quick decisions.
Oh, I'd just be enraged. Like, I'm never doing this. Like, it never ends, it never starts.
I don't know. I think maybe it's just because I spent a lot of time in the library and I just got kind of used to it. I don't really have a problem with reading books out of order, which is a strange thing. So now I'll read them in order, but especially when I was a kid, it was like, well, I want to read something and I like that author. Okay, they don't have the next one, but I'm going to pick it up and read it.
I'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah, and most of the time, especially the books I was reading when I was a kid, it didn't matter. It was, I mean, like, even like Harry Potter. Harry Potter did this thing, because I remember I was listening to this podcast recently. It's called Potterless. Basically, it's like the story of a guy who's roughly our age, and he never read Harry Potter. So he decided, roughly our age, to start reading it. And just like his journey and experience and all these things. And so one of the things he would say every time he would start a new book is he's like, I'm really mad. She keeps like summarizing the last novel in the first chapter. And it's like, yeah, okay, I guess, you know, if you're reading this in succession, yeah, it's a little bit annoying because you already, you know, just know what happens. But back then it was like, yeah, it was like years.
Yeah, you'd have to wait.
And then every single time she like felt the need to like basically be like, here was the whole entire plot of the last book. So I will say too, one of the other things about my whole writing and storytelling experience is when I was a kid, there was this very weird thing that happened to me where essentially many of my friends would use me for the storytelling thing. Like, you know, it's kind of more like the thing that you do when you're kids where you're like, I'm going to invent this world and we're going to go play pretend or whatever, or pretend we're pirates or whatever it is. And they would like essentially utilize me to make the story and make the world.
She's the creative nerd. Make her do it. It's like you're the DM.
Yeah.
Yeah. Playtime.
I had a lot of DM practice. And so some of these things I would write into stories. There were a couple examples where I was like, hey, I like this. I'm going to write this into a story. But sometimes it was just a thing that would happen. And I find it weird that legitimately like 3 separate times this happened to me. Like once when I was pretty young, once when I was a bit older, and then once when I was a bit older after that. Like just, it kept happening to me. Which, I don't know, it's just a weird thing.
I don't know, all my playing was mostly prank related. Dumb pranks, obviously. So I don't think I made you do that. Maybe.
I mean, we've never talked about the pile before, or the mountain. I don't remember what we did call it, but like...
I remember the Fountain of Youth.
I don't know what you're talking
about. That was
about.
like a joke. I think, I just remember the dumb jokes. I don't remember the actual, like, worlds or anything.
Well, no, because I remember, the thing that I'm talking about was, there was this one time, I don't even remember why we did this, but I was staying over at Julie's house, and then basically we decided it would be fun to put as many pillows and blankets and things as possible on top of each other.
That's all your fault, because that's how you'd wake me up.
Is that why?
Yeah, that's how you'd wake me up. But I think we talked about it before. It's because you don't like to yell or anything or disturb people. So instead, you would just suffocate me until I woke up with pillows and stuff.
Is that why you did it to me?
Yeah, you made me mad. So I started doing it. You're like, this is a fun game. Like, yeah, it's a game. Like, just like, pillows and shit on me.
But it is funny because there does exist, I haven't seen it in years, but there does exist this one picture of me, which is just like piles and piles of things on top of me and just like my hand like up like, hey.
And me like laughing in a chair. I have like a blue shirt on, it's got roses on it. I think I have that framed or something in my house now. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that kind of stuff.
We were just weird. Like when I think about it, I talked to somebody about it because I said Chris and I were super mature but dumb kids. Like it was the weirdest thing because I remember distinctly like in middle school where we had that talk with our third friend about how she was maturing above us and we wanted to remain kids. Like, do you know how hard, like how mature you have to be at like 12 to have a conversation and to know what you want in life at that time? But we essentially were like, hey, you want to be an adult? We don't want anything to do with that. So you either need to like decide different activities while we're with you or just go away. So it's like we do the dumbest things.
I remember that.
Yeah. Oh we were very mature about it. She slammed her chair and made a scene in the cafeteria. But like, I just think about that stuff like one day we're doing that. The next day we're trying to suffocate each other with pillows.
Yeah.
Dumb shit.
And I don't know. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of those things that I remember too.
Trying to high five while we're swinging.
Oh, yeah. Just like trying to break each other's hands with high five.
A lot of ours required damage, I guess. Hurting each other in one way or another. That was probably mostly me.
I guess getting back to the topic, what about you? Is there anything that you want to say about writing and like your past with writing and just kind of a thing that you did here and there?
All I put was it's all your fault, like on my notes. Because like I said, I didn't give a shit. Like I hated reading. My parents would lock me up in my room because I wouldn't do the reading. And so my like math and science were through the roof, like A++. Reading was like C on a good day. Like I can't spell, I can't read, go to hell. Like I just hated it until Harry Potter. And then I started to like reading. And then you started giving me books at some point to read. And so, I mean, it all built kind of on you. Like, without you, I don't think I would have cared at all.
It is weird because I feel like you do read a lot now. It's very strange how that's all shifted.
Yeah, I have a whole library, so I mean...
You know, that's fair.
It's kind of how it goes. But I think I've always been a storyteller, though. My whole life has been... I think it's just because my life is full of stories. And that was just how, when I moved around so much, people didn't know anything about me, obviously. I didn't just stay in one place where people were witness to your whole life. So everywhere I moved, I would have to tell stories for people to get to know me. And so then that's just became part of who I am, is people know me for my crazy, outlandish stories.
Yeah, you could have like a bibliography. I think it would have to be like just complete nonsense, though. And people would be like, I don't know if this is true.
Yeah, I think one section would be like, didn't die though. Like, that'd just be one whole chunk. That and
things that I did where I didn't die.
But did you die? Like,
I probably should have.
Probably should have a few times. And then the next one would be like, I didn't think I had a love life, but everyone else did. So here's that.
I think it would be a good book. It'd be kind of weird. I mean, you know, especially because we're not like particularly famous or anything. So it's like, I'm just gonna write bibliography.
I'll just write a whole thing of short stories.
Or an autobiography. Yeah. Sorry, an autobiography.
And when we become famous, I'll then publish it. It'll be done already.
I'll be like, I did this already,
I already
guys.
did this.
Okay, so moving on to the next part, which I guess is like the why do we care? So this is kind of more of the current thing. Oh, actually, I guess I should have mentioned too. Well, okay. I don't know if I should talk a little bit about my writing journey at all, because I mean, like, I kind of talked about it as a kid. I kind of just did it here and there. Some things I guess that are kind of interesting about the fact that I've been a writer for a long time. I was very avid about it when I was a kid. There was probably a certain point in time where I thought that that was what I wanted to do with my life, but I don't know. I was really weird as a kid. I could never figure it out, to be honest with you. I had things I like knew I didn't want to be, but when it came to like, what do you want to do with your life, Chris? I was like, I'm the panic. I don't know. So I just kind of always viewed writing as like a thing. I mean, if ultimately, like if I ever became a writer, that would have been like the dream goal, but I didn't view it as like I have to make this happen. For sure, like go to college, all of this kind of stuff, because obviously I became a chemist. We've talked about that before. And so when I was younger, I wrote like a few projects on and off. There were like some things I wrote more. I did probably around the age of 12, I wrote like a book. Like it was like a full thing that I finished and wrote. But then from there, it was kind of like on and off projects. It was never really things that like I necessarily finished or anything maybe that I super cared about. And then when I went to college, I basically gave it up, which was kind of sad. Not so great. I mean, I think we've talked about this before a few times.
Yours was writing and mine was music. And we're both like on the brink of tears when we talk about it.
Yeah. Like, you know, it was... and there was a lot of reasons. I think one was just because I didn't view it necessarily as being the most productive. You know, I wasn't, like, if I wasn't going to pursue it wholeheartedly, like, kind of what was the point? And, you know, I was nervous about the money thing because, you know, being an artist and this and that. And then I think I also had, like, some issues with writing it for a while. I didn't, like, have a great way to write things. Like, I had some computers, but I think the computers that I have, like, didn't have a great writing system. So, like, I wouldn't enjoy doing it as much. And then, basically, when this is kind of a segue into this next section, basically what happened was the year that sucked completely, where all of these different things came out, and it was awful. Like, it was basically Game of Thrones. I think this wasn't maybe at the same time, but like Dexter had come out maybe a couple of years before, and that was terrible. Star Wars ended, and that was pretty terrible. And I think I just got really mega depressed about it. And it was one of these things where I was super angry. And I was like, this just makes me so mad. I need to do something about this. And then from there, well, actually, there's one more step to this. I started listening to a podcast, which is The Adventure Zone, which some people know about, which is basically a D&D podcast. And for whatever reason, this podcast just kind of finally broke me out of my rut, where I didn't feel like I needed to 100% know what I was talking about, be basically Tolkien or bust in order to write. It was kind of like, no, just have fun with it. You can make a story that's just fun. It doesn't have to be like the most epic thing in the universe. Just write because you like it. So that's kind of my thing, and I don't know, maybe we'll get back to it as we're kind of talking about some of these other things, but that's just kind of like how I've gotten to the place where I am now, which is more just writing for the fun of it. I would love someday if I could be published. That would be a totally cool thing, but I just like writing. I enjoy writing stories. I should do it because I like it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that is a topic we talk about all the time that we obviously personally struggle with, but we try to encourage people where we're like, if you enjoy it, just do it. Fuck everything else. Like, find the time. It's part of your me time. It's part of your own therapy. Like, just do it. You don't have to make money off of it. You don't have to please or, what's the word? Prove anything to anybody else. Like, it's for you, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, talking about kind of the now, the why do we care about writing and storytelling? Is there anything that you want to say?
I've been like giving you this episode, and you keep just passing it back. Like,
Well, I'm
talk.
checking. Do you have anything you want to say? I mean, I can start talking about some of these.
No,
like...
fine. I'll take it. Give me the
Okay.
mic.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, I'm more of a storyteller than I am a writer, I would say. And always have been. I think stories are part of what makes us human. Like, that's been a consistency throughout time. It doesn't matter what culture or what time period, people have always told stories. And that, to me, is like true human connection. You don't have to necessarily agree on anything else, and someone can like your story. Like, that's just part of it. And there's like a beauty in that, and that's typically how I connect to people, is I start telling stories. So I guess that's, as a writer, is a way to reach more people with your voice in a way. But Krista was going on about all these stories that just upset her. And what was funny is, I mean, I've read a lot, but I also am ADHD, which means I don't remember most of what I read. So I was trying to think of like novels that upset me, but I also just get bored. What'll happen is I'll start a series, and it'll be like 20 books, and I'll read 2 books a week, like 500 pages each, forever. And then just one day, one book, I just don't like it anymore. I just stop. Like, I don't need it to end.
Right.
So I'm not as disappointed as Krista ends up being. Like, I can just stop things and be like, well, I won't remember shit anyway. Like, it's not going to bother me. And I do it a lot, and it has irritated, like, pretty much everyone I've ever dated, that I'll just, like, be watching a show with them, and I'll just stop being interested. And I'm like, you can keep watching it. They're like, no, I started with you. I want to finish. I'm like, I don't give a shit about it. I don't want to watch it anymore. So
that is pretty funny.
That's on your own time. Like, I don't care. So like I said, because of that part of my personality, I don't have big disappointments in that way. But I would say one that was in particular, because we mentioned shows and movies and things, because it's like a story building, is Supernatural really bothered me. And that's because, well, it went on for too long. Like, I understand there was, I don't know if it was the writer's strike or what, but essentially they got canceled on season 4, and then season 5 they just had to bullshit their way back into a story, but they did it, and it was great. Like, they created a new character, Castiel, that everyone liked. But I love character development, if it's a show or a book or anything. That's one of the big things. I love to see people change and grow. And so the ultimate thing to kill a book or a TV series is if the characters don't fucking change. Because it's boring. Like, after so long, it's the same stuff. And Supernatural, any slight sliver of character development the two main characters got was always rewritten or undone. And I'm like, what's the fucking point? Like, season 1 and season 10, they're the same goddamn people, and that's stupid. Like,
because they kept having, like, memory wipes and things,
yeah, they
right?
would just... It's essentially still like one is the demon child and feels ultimate guilt, but is technically the goody boy because of that. And the other one's like, oh, protective brother and angst. And I'm like, get it, fuck. Like, it's so boring now.
Yeah. Another thing, too, that I have problems with, I mean, to talk about Supernatural as part of this, is I don't like things that never end. I know that this is a thing they love to do in TV shows and stuff. I'm like, please. You have to end it. It is so, like, after a while, I just cannot care anymore. It doesn't matter how interesting the story is. It doesn't matter what a rich narrative you've weaved. I cannot be interested for 20 seasons in a TV show. Like, I just can't do it. My brain, my poor little brain, it can't do it.
No, that's my rant, is like, we've mentioned it before. Nerds don't like endings, and I'm fucking tired of it. Like, just let things end. They're supposed to. Like, that's the point. All of my favorite, I don't know why I said it like that, all my favorite shows and movies and whatnot, they knew the ending before they even started. And most of the things I like are trilogy. They're just 3, which is the perfect kind of, like, the beginning is a little bit of everything and back filler. The second part is a lot of filler with, like, the history and the backstory and the best fight scene or most epic moment. And then the third one's all the epic moments left. Like, that's the flow. That is the good way to do things. And, like, shows like Futurama, Breaking Bad. I don't personally like Breaking Bad that much, but yeah, I can appreciate what it is. Penny Dreadful, they all had an ending and ended at a good time.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Breaking Bad as well. Like, I think, like, looking back, I don't know if Breaking Bad was, like, my favorite show ever or whatever. It's just... I did appreciate it for the fact that it had a story, it had an up, and then it had an end. And the thing about the ending was it made sense. It was like one of the few that came out during that time that actually made sense. And actually, it kind of annoyed me there for a while because I think Breaking Bad started a weird trend where everybody felt like they had to have edgy endings because this happened with How I Met Your Mother. And this also happened with another bad one that I get to talk about, Dexter. Where Dexter just, like, that ending was
disrespectful.
So bad.
So disrespectful.
Like, after it was over, I, like, felt like I was gonna be sick. Like, that's how bad it was. It was like, why? All of this does not make any sense at all. And, like, I've said this before, so one of the things that makes a really good story versus what makes a bad story, I think sometimes people get confused about this idea of, like, twists and, like, subversing expectations, you know, that kind of thing. When you do it correctly, it's great and wonderful, and it's a total surprise, and it kills. However, when you do it badly, for example, like Dexter, it just feels like a betrayal. Like, and so the big thing with Dexter was basically the whole entire plot. Okay, he was a serial killer. In case you don't know about Dexter. He's a serial killer with a conscience, essentially. But they made a really big deal out of being like, he's a good guy. That was like the whole message that they went across the whole entire time. And then the ending was essentially like, no, we're going to treat him like he's the worst guy possible. Absolutely. Like, he's just going to get completely shit on. And it's like, but you spent 7 seasons of basically trying to convince me that that wasn't true. You could have been more gray. You could have, you know, had him have more bad guy moments, but you didn't do that. Like, you had him, like, he specifically went after other serial killers, or, like, you know, he wouldn't kill certain people because it messed with his code, and, like, he tried to do good things, essentially. And it's like, so for you to have the ending be just basically, like, completely shitting on him, it was so bad.
Yeah.
And,
well, the key to a good twist is that when you go back and watch again, you can see how they got there, I think. When they just do a twist to do one, it just makes you mad because you're like, why? What was the point? Where did that come from? but even if you didn't pick up on the little things that led to this twist, there's still a part of you that kind of knows about them. So when you get there, it's like, oh my god, like your mind's blown. But then you piece it all together and it all just like makes sense. It's part of the journey with it. Like, for instance, one of our favorite video games, Jade Empire, that twist to this day fucks with us. And like every time we replay the game, we're like, fuck you. Like, we get so mad. From the beginning at the character that like does the twist on you, and you're just like, piece of shit, I hate you. And anytime he says anything, we're like, fuck you and everything you are. Like, we're just so mad.
Well, even the thing that's funny too is there are like a couple moments where it's like it hints at it, and then like especially because I remember like the first time I played, I did not see it coming at all. Like it was just not a thing that I expected. And then I went back and I played it again because that's what I do when I really like a game. And then I was like. Like there was a piece of shit. There was a couple moments where this character would say things, and I'm like,
I should have known.
You did say that weird, you son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch. What did I know?
Or well, even two. Another one to kind of talk about this because this is another thing I put on my bad list, and it's a bad that I'm sure that everybody knows about. Game of Thrones, and a part of the reason why I'm going to put it on here is because. This is a good example of this, where when it did it correctly, it did it wonderfully, beautifully, correctly. And then when it did it wrong, it was like complete revenge. Like, I'm so entirely angry. I cannot believe you did this to the story. Because, for example, things like Ned Stark dying, the Red Wedding, you know, like all of those things, especially like if you go back and you rewatch those seasons that lead up to that, it totally makes sense. Like Ned was doing a bunch of really stupid stuff. Like he was basically going into things that he shouldn't have been. He was asking questions where he probably shouldn't have been. He wasn't being careful enough and he got killed. It made sense. Then for the Red Wedding, it was kind of the same thing. Like it was essentially, it's Robb, that's what his name is. Robb Stark. He was going around doing a bunch of really stupid things. He wasn't being very smart about the war. He kept making all these stupid mistakes. And even like towards the end, he was like losing a bunch of battles. So by the time the Red Wedding happened, it's like, yeah, I mean, it hurts. Yeah, it sucks. I like those characters. I don't want them to be dead. But in retrospect, it made sense.
Yeah.
And then there was the real ending of Game of Thrones, which when you talk about bad storytelling, this is probably like the best example that you could use. And it hurts so bad, especially for me, somebody who cares about storytelling so much, because some of the moments in Game of Thrones that were good were some of the best storytelling and honestly almost anything at all ever. And then for it to be so bad at the end, it was just like, I felt it. I felt it right in the heart.
It just, to me, it was disrespectful is how I put it, because everything about it was lazy, is how I see it. Like, it wasn't like the costume people were on the ball still. They made a bunch of mistakes. They did a bunch of outfits that made no fucking sense and looked weird, like you were saying. And then the editing was poor in it. They left a coffee cup in a scene. And then with all the storylines, it's like they just went online and Googled, like, what fans thought of.
Yeah.
And picked a handful. And then just did one chaotic thing, and that was to pick who was going to be the king in the end, just to piss everyone off. Like, I distinctly remember at GameStop, we had a Funko Pop series to anticipate that season, and it showed, like, 6 different characters on the throne. And it was kind of like a game. You're supposed to try to pick the one that would be it, because it'd be worth money. No, they didn't come out with that dumbass pick, like, and even one of the characters was like, what the fuck? Like, in the show. And it everything about it, like, they were so lazy. I can understand that they were done. I would probably be sick of that show too. I mean, I can tell it takes a lot of effort. It was, 10 years of them working on it. I can understand being done with it, but it's your last run, man. Like,
yeah. I think, from what I understand, what happened, the 2 guys, I can't think of their names right now, the people who wrote it,
George
essentially, well, no,
the script writers?
It's D&D, but I don't remember what the D's stand for. Anyway, when they got the script, because they got the script originally, like, very first season, they went to George R. R. Martin and were basically like, hey, we want to do this. And he like quizzed them, all this stuff, like made sure they were true fans, all this stuff. And he basically said he wouldn't give the script to anybody else. So they probably got to a point where they were kind of sick of it, whatever. But then they couldn't transfer it to somebody else because of that stipulation. Like, it basically had to be them. And I think even like HBO didn't want to end it. I don't even think George R. R. Martin wanted to end it. It was like essentially them being like, we don't want to do this anymore, but you won't let us transfer the rights to somebody else.
So we're gonna write the shittiest season you've ever fucking seen on TV.
Yeah. It still sucks. I'm not like saying, you know, this, that, or the other about it, but they could have definitely handled it better. Like, I think if George R. R. Martin had found somebody else who he liked to pass the script on to, you know, something like that. But yeah, instead it just ended up with, it's so bad, and nobody was happy. And it's just, it's so bad too, because even looking at it, there's things where you could be like, okay, this could make sense. Like, if you had the timing and you like worked your way into it or whatever. But then, like you said too, there were just all these things that were so stupid and just so, like, they forced it in there. Because, like, I know the one, and, you know, just to be fair, I mean, for anybody who cares, I'm just going to spoil some things in Game of Thrones. I think no one really cares anymore. Nobody's telling anybody watch Game of Thrones anymore.
No. Mm-hmm.
The biggest one that irritated me was the Sansa thing. And it's not because I disagreed with it. It was because it was like, so wait a minute, you're going to do this whole thing where you're going to purposefully unify the lands. Like, under one king, you're going to make it kind of more of a democracy, kind of. But then the North is just going to be separated. That doesn't make sense.
All of you band together. We're going to fuck off because we hate you.
Yeah. And it's like, I understand that that's kind of like where the story, like the North story was leading, but that explanation didn't make any sense. And it irritated me. So, and even too, the king thing, where Bran ended up being the king, it was like, so wait a minute. So the kingdoms are going to be unified under Bran, your brother, but you're going to say fuck off, the North is separated. What?
I still love her for when they're like, yeah, Bran will be king. She's like, what about his dick? Like, it doesn't fucking work. That was my favorite moment of the whole season. And she just straight up was like, is anyone questioning how he's gonna have kids? Like, no, I'm the only one that thinks about his dick working. Like,
yeah, that was the
highlight of the whole season.
Ugh. Yeah,
no,
there were
so many. I don't think I liked any storyline, like how it was resolved. There are ones I'm okay with, like, I guess, yeah, but it's mostly minor characters. For the most part, I don't like any of it.
Yeah, and I think, like, one of the things too is they didn't answer a bunch of questions. They left a lot of really, like, hanging thread things. Yeah, I think even, like, the thing with Arya was kind of weird and out of nowhere. So, like, for example, the whole Daenerys thing, where she always kind of had this thing where it was like, oh, I can't get pregnant. And, like, they brought that up, like, multiple times. And then it just kind of ended up not being anything. And I was like, so why do we waste so much time on this? Like, you brought this up, like, almost every single season. And it was nothing.
Yeah.
And there was a few things like that. Like, I know one of the other ones a lot of people got mad about was, like, all the symbols. Because, like, when the White Walkers or whatever, when they'd kill people, they'd, like, leave them in a symbol, you know, on the ground. And it was like,
what was that?
Well, we gonna answer it? Is there any reason here? No. There was just a whole bunch of things. No reason.
Oof.
But if we want to talk about things that are more, at least what I consider to be good stories, I know one that I really ended up liking a lot, which I'll maybe talk about this and then maybe we can move on, is I really liked Horizon Zero Dawn. Did you play that one? That ended up being actually like a story that really stuck with me for a long time, and I wasn't expecting it. And also it was weird because I could not give a shit about the gameplay in that game. Like, there was all these times where it'd be like, hey, you should, like, go do this side quest. And I'd be like, nah, fuck off. I'm getting to the story.
I don't give a shit.
I cannot stand the gameplay. I don't know. I think it's just because Horizon Zero Dawn kind of tried to be an RPG. I mean, I think it technically is an RPG, but I just did not enjoy the RPG elements in that game. Like, they didn't really lead anywhere that was interesting. It was not interesting to gather resources. I couldn't give a shit about killing the dinosaur robots. Like, I was like, I don't.
I gave a shit about killing all the dinosaur robots.
Okay, well, you kill all the dinosaur robots.
Yeah. Well, what would happen is I'd come across one and be like, oh, fuck! And then spend way too long, because I'm way unprepared to kill it. And then within the next hour, I get the quest. It's like, hey, do you know about that big old dinosaur out there? We need to go kill it. I'm like, bitch, I already did. You're gonna make me do it again. It was so hard. All my resources are gone.
Yeah, I know the one that got me.
The Thunderjaw. In the middle of the desert.
Whatever, is that the crocodile thing?
Oh, the crocodile things.
I hated the crocodiles. Those ones got me really bad.
The thing that got me was the Thunderbird, or whatever it is. The, like, giant hawk of thunder that you're just, like, wandering through the jungle. Oh, fuck!
Yeah, I think I basically just kind of noped with that one. Like, anytime
I was
like, no. Because I think at one point they made you fight one, or maybe it was something equivalent, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I just want to go do the story. But anyway, the point that I was getting at was I really liked the story in that one. And I would say that it's probably a fairly generic story. It's not like the most inventive thing ever. But it's kind of a mystery where, you know, you're kind of in this world and you don't really know what's going on. I mean, maybe you have some kind of ideas about it. But there's like a lot of mystery as to like, why are there dinosaur robots? Why is everybody here super primitive? What is happening? What is going on? And you kind of like get these hints that there used to be other humans, and like essentially you're almost like a second race of humans. And I don't know. I liked a lot where it ended up, and even some of the moments where they were like leading into that, because I think that this was another one where they had like little audiobook things that you could pick up and like get kind of background story things. And there was a few of those where it was like, it was devastating.
Yeah.
Some of them, like they would tell stuff and I'm like, I feel like I'm gonna,
they're
gonna cry a little bit.
Well, today was my daughter's birthday, and they just talk about like their daughter, and you're just like, oh my god, why?
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, they keep moving us. I feel like a sheep in here. And then they'd kind of pause. It was the way, like, the inflection they had. Like, it wasn't just a codex. They were sitting there. You hear their voices, and they have this, like, they're human. Like, they have human connections and stuff. And so you get to wander through. They're not just a random codex. You're like, cool, ignore. You hear all of it while you're wandering around.
I know. The one that really got me was, I think it was like a series of 3 of them. And basically, the first one was like this message from like a husband to their wife. Like they're in the military, right? And just being like, hey, you know, things are, we're getting shipped this way, or, you know, kind of whatever. I love you, blah, blah, blah. And then you get a second one. And it's like very similar to the first one, but like you can tell that something's like not right with it. And then like accompanying that is like a message from the wife being like, hey, like, are you sure if something doesn't seem right? Like, there's something wrong. I don't, like, understand what's going on. And then there's, like, a third one where you can, like, clearly tell it's been edited pretty heavily. And then her response to it just being like, I think my husband's dead, and they're not telling me that he is dead. Like, I don't understand what's going on. Nobody will give me any answers. I've gotten, like, 3 messages that are, like, essentially exactly the same. And it was like, oh God. My heart. And especially because at that point in the story, like you did kind of, you knew what was happening. So it was just kind of like, oh, my poor heart. That was just one where by the end of it, I had so many feelings. And I don't know. I really liked that story. I was not expecting to like that story at all. And I really liked that story.
Well, one of the things I really liked about it was I have this I wouldn't say new. I have this trend of mine. I like females that are unlikable in stories. That's how I want to put it. Because for so long, females have been like 1 or 2 notes in stories. In popular stories, I guess I should say. And it's almost always pleasant. Like, even when they're weird, they're still really alluring and pleasant. Like, let's take Belle from Beauty and the Beast. She's the weirdo. But she's also the most beautiful person, and she's so smart and like and everyone technically loves her. They just think she's weird. Like, oh, that's the closest you can get to a normal person that's female. Like, okay, she's not allowed to have flaws. So, like, Aloy from the beginning is not very likable. Like, you're playing her, and I find her to be extremely annoying. Like, I get why she is, which is one of the reasons why it didn't bother me when she started playing. But I like that pretty much no one fucking likes her. Including herself. Like, she doesn't even like herself. And that people start realizing, like, oh, she's just kind of weird. She doesn't mean to, like, she's trying to help people. she's not a shitty person. She's just fucked up. Like, let's let her help.
Yeah, she was basically like an outcast.
Yeah, like,
so she doesn't have people experience.
Yeah, she doesn't have any people skills. So it all makes sense. But I like that even though they could have easily gone into the trope of she's really like eccentric and people think she's gorgeous and weird, they're just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, you can help, I guess.
All right.
Why do you have the thing on your head? Okay, what?
I don't know you.
Keep talking in that space and looking at things. We're just gonna let you do that.
You want to help us? Fine.
Yeah, and a couple of us will hit on you because that's always fun, but otherwise, nothing will come of it.
Yeah, nothing does come of it.
I did like flirting with the one guy though. It's not the king, the other one that you can flirt with that lost
I think I
his
did
sister.
flirt with the king, but
I flirted with both, but like it was more fun to.
But I think I flirted with the king because I was like, is anything gonna happen? And nothing did.
Nothing does.
So I don't know why I flirted.
No, I was mean to the king. I was like, you just want to use me as a booty call. It's like, I know you loved Ursa. And he's like, you're right. You just remind me of her because you're so strong. And you're like, bitch, yeah, I know.
And I got red dreads.
You see these dreads?
And I can do whatever I want.
I don't need you.
Yeah, but I will say that there is a second coming out to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly don't know if I'll play it. I am very on the fence about it because I really liked this story. But where the story ends, I'm like, there's no 2. There can't be a 2. It was a definite ending. So and the other problem is too, is I really hated the RPG elements in this game. I don't know, maybe you'll play it and you'll tell me if you like it or not. But I'm just, honestly, I've seen trailers for it and I'm like, it looks kind of pretty, but like, you're gonna have to convince me because right now, I liked that first story so much that I'm afraid that to do this and that you'll ruin it. Please don't.
Yeah, I'll play it and let you know. Because I don't mind the gameplay. Because I like killing dinosaurs.
Well, I'm glad that somebody did because I didn't. I was just like, I think I played it a little bit at the beginning and then after a while I was like, nah, beeline to the finish. I just started ignoring things. I would like go to cities and I'm like, yeah, where's the quest? All right. I had a hard time with that final boss.
Yeah, I can imagine because you're not leveled.
I was not prepared.
I literally, like, this first half, I went through the main quest line, ignored everybody, and then as soon as I had trouble with the main quest, I was like, alright. And, like, went off and did everything else. Like, every single underground map coven thing.
I did like those. Those were kind of cool.
Interesting, where you unlocked, like, the new creature type, and I did all those. I hunted everything. I didn't do a lot of the teeny tiny side quests, because I'm like, I don't give a shit about none of you people. Like...
Yeah.
I did a handful of the, like, my wife's lost in the woods ones, but I didn't do any in the city, where they're like, can you go find this rare flower? I'm like, how about no, it's a waste of my goddamn time.
So did you want to talk about any of the other ones on your list?
Well, I think my 2 favorite kinds of stories, especially talking in movie or show-wise, not particularly novels. Novels, I tend to just read series and get lost in them or bored. But I love, one, movies that, like, are deep and inherently, like, dark or sad or have a lot to them, but always end on a positive note. Like, I could be sad for the whole rest of the movie, but I want it to end on a good note so that you feel good about it. You don't just dread watching it or anything like that. But there's beauty in the darkness of it, and the movie I would use for that would be Shawshank Redemption. That's a very dark and deep movie, but has, like, but the music and the light ending where, like, it all turns out, the bad people get what's coming to them, the good people get what's going to them. a perfect story to me. Like, that's just the movement of it and everything. And the obvious character development of pretty much everybody in there. I mean, the movie's doesn't give a lot of screen time to everybody, but almost everybody is changed by this main character in one way or another. And I really like how that movement works. And then my other favorite movies are when they've got like 20 components going on, and you don't know how or why, if any of them are connected. You're just watching it, and then it all comes to like one moment. And it's the most beautiful moment. Like, you get all this backstory for this one singular moment. And it's the greatest part of the movie. And the two movies I can really think of are particularly Crazy Stupid Love. It's like one of my favorite movie scenes of all time, because it's like, you had no idea this shit was really connected. They were loosely, which is why you didn't think about it, but they were so connected, and it's so amazing how it ends up. And then another one, I just forgot it. Shit. What was the other one I saw? Oh, and the other one would be The Help. It doesn't have the exact same feel that I'm talking about, where it's like 20 different storylines going on at once, but they keep hinting at this moment, and like all these characters are affected by this moment in a different way, and you don't know, since you have no idea what the moment is, you don't know what is and isn't supposed to be affected by it. And then when that moment is revealed, it just makes the movie. Like, it just sets that moment where you're like, oh my god, like, that's why all that shit was happening, because of this. And now I'm privy to it, like some secret that every other character knew but you, and you get to figure it out with them and just create this whole thing with the movie.
I definitely feel that way about Crazy Stupid Love.
Mm-hmm.
That's a funny
beautifully
movie.
made scene. Like,
that is a very funny movie too. People should watch that. It's a pretty good movie. It's kind of like a romantic comedy. I guess that's what you would put it in the category of. But
yeah,
I thought it was funny.
I think it's more comedy than romance, even though the whole subject matter is all about relationships. Because it's about more than one, it doesn't feel like heavy-handed or overdone. It's like the story romance of 5 different couples. And so because of that, it doesn't feel just like some corny girly movie. It feels like a comedy that happens to be about romance. Like, it's a solid movie.
But then the ending, it just all comes together.
So
to
perfect.
This one beautiful moment.
One perfect moment. You, David Lindhagen? Just, like, every part of that scene is perfect. Any movie can have a perfect moment, and that's what you should aim for, is that perfect moment.
And hopefully the perfect moment is more towards the end.
Yeah. So you're not like, why am I still here?
I saw this perfect moment. I'm done.
I'm done. We're over it.
We got boba again, but hopefully we won't be as annoying about it as we were last time. That was probably one of my more favorite endings, just because
boba nice.
Well, there was like this one part where it was like a pretty good section where we were just drinking boba, and I was like, well,
there you go.
Yes, this is the ending. It's a weird episode where we talk mostly about theater and then just boba slurping noises.
Inappropriate slurping noises.
Okay, so it's my story time, and I didn't want to talk about something that was like too related to stories or writing or whatever. So the story that I have chosen to tell is a story that I told a lot when I was younger. I think Julie was talking about how I used this for some kind of interview, audition or something. I don't even remember why, but whatever. I guess we like maybe had to tell a story or something.
You're supposed to tell a funny story, and I critiqued you because I'm like, that's not funny enough.
Well, fair. But I still thought it was pretty funny. So, set up to this story. Julie and I come from, well, Julie's kind of weird.
Under,
she's kind of weird. Yeah, we come from the land down under now. The land of the corn, but like a smaller kind of, I guess you call it a town that is in this land of the corn place. It's not very big, is basically the point that I'm getting at. So there was, around this time, because this would have been around the time we were in high school, that there was this particular light that for whatever reason, I could not tell you, it took so long for this light to change. And I think it was because the main stretch of it was like basically like a highway, And then you had 2 stretches off the side of it that was just like a 2-lane regular kind of road. So if you were on the 2-lane road wanting to turn left, basically, you could be sitting there for like 10 minutes. And I swear, if you went there late at night...
Oh, it wouldn't turn.
Yeah, it was just like, should I go?
Yeah, I ran a couple red lights. Like, I'm like, I waited so long.
Do you not know I'm here? There's nobody
Keep
here.
reversing and pulling back up. Like, come on, buddy.
It's weird too, because like especially when it's that late at night, it's like there's nobody there. There's nothing
No.
to do on that road that late at night. It's empty. So it's just like you sitting at this light and it's like, please, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. But anyway, so I was sitting at this light, and across the way there was this guy who was in another small car, and I think it must have been just like not a very busy day, or the way that our cars were positioned, whatever. I could like clearly see this guy. Like I like almost had like just full view of this guy, and he was just rocking out, just completely like banging on his drums. Like I would guess he was probably listening to like some metal music, because that was kind of the way he was doing it. It wasn't like gentle drumming or anything. It was like
Neil Diamond.
yeah, it was like full head banging. Like he was into it. And I mean, we were sitting there for like I said, like 10 minutes or something, and I'm just sitting there across the way, just watching this guy drumming out and being like, I guess I don't know what to do here. There's not. I like.
Air guitar.
He wasn't like paying any attention to me. He was just like full drumming out for like 10 minutes. And then eventually, you know, the light turned and we
Parted ways.
But it was just one of these things where just sitting there, like, because I just had such a good view of him. And this guy just like relentlessly did not let up for 10 minutes. It was like a feat to stamina and everything. And then we just went our separate ways.
Never saw Drummer Man again.
No, but I do think about him sometimes. You know,
Where is he now?
when I'm at very long lights and I'm like, man, I wish he was back, because I'm pretty bored. Especially when I'm at that light, because that light still exists and I think it's still a problem.
The Drummer Man.
I don't know. You live closer to that light, so you can tell me if it's a problem still.
Well, yeah. The weird thing was I was at that light at like 6 in the morning. No, it was like 5:30 in the morning. And I'm one of those people, I probably wouldn't notice that Drummer Man. I don't pay no attention to nobody when I'm sitting in a light. Like, I'm either in my own head or on the phone or singing or doing, like, I'm the person you watch. I'm not the person who watches. And I got a message from, like, one of my exes from years ago. Just sending a message like, were you at this intersection at like 5:30 in the morning? I went, maybe. I saw you. All right. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? It was one of those weird, like, okay.
No, I feel like I notice people in cars a lot. I'm not really sure why that is, but I don't normally notice them doing anything particularly bizarre, I guess. It just, I don't know, this one time, for whatever reason. And it's weird, too, because that intersection, the lanes, like, across are pretty long. But I don't know, much like our Seattle story, apparently when I see something, I'm just like, whoa. And I'm very observant, because I don't know, I watched this Drummer Man for a very long time. And it was very good.
No, I think I'm the one people watch. So whenever I have a lot of instances where I just look over and I'm like horrified when I'm stuffing my face with a taco or sushi or something. And then I sing a lot, and I'm animated when I sing. So, I mean, I think people probably watch me. Not to sound conceited, I think that's what happens. And I've had people in traffic get out of their car to come talk to me. So I definitely think I'm the one being watched.
What do people say to you?
Usually hitting on me. Yeah, I was like in traffic on one of the main highways we have. And it was the kind that you'd stop for about 2 minutes and then move a little bit, stop for 2 minutes. And he like was in front of me. And just like, or no, he was behind me, came up behind me, and then got in front of me. And honked at me and said something like when he was getting in front of me, and I just let him over. Like, I don't care. And then, yeah, he parked his car and got out to talk to me. And thanked me for, like, letting him over. And, like, you're so sweet and you're pretty. Like, he hit on me. And I was like, dude, you need to get back in your car. Like, let's go. Yeah.
I'm not here to be hit
I'm
on.
not
I'm
here.
trying to go home.
Like, you need to move forward. So now we probably should talk about the project at hand, the NaNoWriMo. That's just how I'm going to say it.
Write more.
Right, more. So we're gonna kind of go over some tips for people because I think everyone is a bit of a storyteller or writer, however you want to do it. Whether it's journaling or novels or facts or whatever you want to do, we think that everyone is able to write. It's one of those skills. Actually, I feel that way about most skills, is that you just got to put time and effort into it. And sometimes it's overwhelming to start. So we wanted to kind of give you a rundown of how this project works and what we suggest writing tips wise.
Mm-hmm. So, for National Novel Writing Month, essentially the goal is you're supposed to write 50,000 words, which is quite a lot. And especially kind of thinking over crunching the numbers and stuff, I realize it's quite a lot. But essentially the purpose of it is to write the first draft of your novel in a month. A very, very ambitious goal. And especially, if your novel is more than 50,000 words, which is possible. So, like, trying to think of, like, what would be a good example of 50,000 words. I feel like it would probably have to be a book that's around the 300 to 500 page kind of mark. That would be just my rough guess, having written. Okay, that's a very bad rough guess.
The Great Gatsby is about 50,000 words.
Okay.
Of Mice and Men, Fight Club.
Oh, so that's a pretty short
The
book,
Giver.
then.
Yeah, The Giver's really short, so it's a pretty short book.
Because I know with fantasies are more like 100,000 words.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know what that translates to either. But, okay, so like a shorter book. So probably
about
less
than 200 pages.
Yeah, something like that. So, tips for doing this. Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm really the best to give tips about this specific thing in general, but I can definitely give tips about writing and, like, things that I've found that have worked to be a better writer. And kind of like Julie was saying, I think that anybody can write. I think, like, the biggest hurdles to writing are the just doing it part. Because I think, like, so a lot of the things that I've sort of subscribed to recently have kind of said this, that you've just really just got to put it down, whatever it is. And, like, it helps for sure to kind of, like, start with an outline, I guess would be the way that I would say it. Decide what your story is going to be about. Like, maybe write, like, a small summary, decide your characters, decide, like, essentially the flow of the plot. Doing that stuff definitely helps. Like, I'm not going to say that stuff doesn't help. But the biggest hindrance to people not writing is just you physically not doing it. And I know that kind of sounds like trash, terrible advice, but, like, believe me, it really is. Because if you can sit there and just power through it, even if it sucks, like, because this is the big thing. You're gonna hate it. I'm gonna tell you. This is the secret that nobody tells you, that probably everybody tells you. You're gonna hate it at first. You're gonna hate yourself. You're gonna hate every single thing. But the thing is that if you don't write it down, it will never be written down. That is just what will happen. You could sit there and try to, like, perfect it. Well, no, because I did that for a long time.
No, we both did. It was kind of more of a joke. Like, when you say it, it sounds silly. You're just like, you gotta write it down or it will never be written down. And yeah, that sounds silly, but when you think about it, how many times do you talk about an idea? Or how many nights do you just, like, think about it when you're trying to sleep or when you're driving? You just create this whole world or this whole plot line. And to you, it's almost done. Like, when you think of it, you're like, oh man, that was great. I'll write it down. And then you don't, and you don't remember all those details. You don't remember everything that you just thought about. And it goes to the wayside. You just never do it. So it's super easy to think about it and almost feel like it's complete because you had that thought and you're proud of yourself for that thought. But you didn't write it down, so it didn't happen. It doesn't matter. Like, no one else will know about it. You'll never remember it. Like,
yeah. And there's that, and there is just also the thing of, I think, just powering through it, because what I said is very real. Like, so I talked about how when I was a kid, I wrote a book. I wrote another book 3 years ago. And then I wrote something a little bit more recently that's like a novella. So those are 3 things like that I've finished. They're not published or anything. I think I've said that before, but like I would say that they are completed works. Like I did it. I did the thing that I wanted to. I feel good about it. All that kind of stuff. And the biggest thing for me was just physically, no matter how uncomfortable I felt about it, just write it down. Like, because you can sit there and you can think about semantics. You can think about, oh, this isn't perfect. Like, I need it to, like, be better. This really sucks. Like, this isn't the way I want this scene to be. You know, all this stuff. And, like, I think that it's good to think about those things. But when you're writing it, you need to just write it down. You need to get through chapter, all the way to the end. And just think about those things, like, while you're writing it. Because once you get to the end, you can go back and fix things. But the problem is that if you never get to the end, you'll never do it.
Right.
So at least if you get one draft, you did it.
You did the thing. Be proud. Yeah, I would say, at least in my youth, probably now too, my biggest thing is I would write, let's say I wrote 50 pages, okay? Started it, had a good meaty start. I would go back and read it, not like most of it, and then just start over again. Or I'd just write certain pieces and be like, well, now that doesn't make sense because I did this and I decided that, like, it's my ADHD brain coming up with 10 ideas that I didn't technically write for. And so now what I try to do is I don't even read the whole thing over again because it's one that's just feeding it into your brain and making you hate it more and more. I read what's relevant to what I last wrote, like within the last chapter or so, and then continue from there. And like you said, just write it down, and that's your first draft. You can always go back, clean it up, like fix it or do whatever else. Or even write another one and use that one as reference, like however it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and even too, one of the things that I just learned about is I saw this on Facebook or something, where essentially if you come to a part where you're really unsure of it, so I don't know, well, just like pretend you've come to a scene, it's like a ballroom scene or whatever. It's really big, expansive thing. And you're like, oh, fuck, like, I gotta, like, think of music. I gotta think of all these characters' names. I've gotta, like, what is actually gonna happen here? How is this important to the plot? I don't know what's happening. I just decided there was gonna be a ballroom scene. Why did I do this? I hate myself. If you really, really can't figure out what to write, you can essentially just skip it. And kind of what I've seen people do is basically, like, put in brackets and be basically, like, insert ballroom scene here, or like this character does something really cool here, and then you just put it in brackets and then you keep going to the part that you already know what you want to talk about, so then you can come back to that scene later when you're in a better mind, when maybe you don't hate yourself as much, when you've thought about ballroom music
maybe
and a million people's names. Yeah, go to a ball, get dressed up, feel, you know, have your belle of the ball moment, then come back and write the scene.
Write about all your feelings.
But even still, like we were saying before this, the big thing is you just keep writing. And that's, like, if you get stuck, it's not a bad thing to be stuck. I mean, I think that that's kind of a thing that people will sometimes, I don't know, kind of get hung up on, like writer's block and this and that. It's like, no, like, yes, writer's block is real, but also, like, you still know where the rest of your story is going. Just skip the part you don't know and keep going, and maybe it'll come to you. Like, that's happened to me plenty of times. Like, I'll be in a later part of the story and I'm like, this works, I know what I'm doing, I need to go back and fix that, not because I'm mad at myself, but because I'm like, this, I know where I'm supposed to go with this now.
Right.
So,
well, I'd say one of the things I learned with my most recent writing project is to immerse yourself in the realm of which you're writing. And what I mean by that is, like, if I write about elves, let's say, just in general, because everybody can write about elves, watch Lord of the Rings, play D&D, like, do stuff that's related. There are very rarely completely original ideas. People like to think they're going to be the next Tolkien, but he is a very unique person. You're probably not Tolkien. Like, there's a really, really slim chance that you're Tolkien, and if you were, probably be a lot easier for you. Like, let's just be honest.
But I mean, okay, and you know, this is even a point I can make too, because I had talked about this, like how I got very hung up on, like, essentially Tolkienism, where it's like, oh man, if I don't write like him, like, what's the point? But also, like, understand, I want everybody, dear listeners, to understand this fact about Tolkien. He loved this shit. Like, he spent years and years and years and years writing this. Like, it was not just something that one day he just wrote and it was very casual. Like, he thought about it. It was, like, basically his entire life's work.
Yeah. So it's easy to feel inferior and to be like, well, what I'm writing is not original if I'm pulling from other places, and like, that's not the case. It's not so much that you have to have an original idea, it's that you have to have an idea from your perspective. You're trying to give a new way to look at something or to tell something. So I think it helps me a lot to just immerse myself into other stories or other related topics to what I'm writing. And it sparks ideas, even just talking to people. Like, I have trouble writing romance aspects, but I do appreciate them when I'm reading or playing a game, as long as it's not the main idea. I like it to be just a piece. So I was like, I should write something like that. I'm a robot and hate being romantic. I don't know how to write some romance. And so I would just ask my friends, tell me your perfect first date. Like, with any or as many or as few details as you want. And I got completely different answers from people. Or one person was like, well, something unexpected has to happen. I'm like, well, that's not a complete idea, but okay. Like, thanks. And then another person who talked about their parents' first date and gave me like every single detail from their parents' first date and how great it was. And then the last person who basically was saying like, here's everything that needs to happen. Here's what I want. Here's where I would go. Here's like, they gave me their practice story. And well, yeah, I'm not going to just take that story and be like, this is mine now. But I pull pieces, like I pull the idea of, yeah, you want something unexpected. You want to see these parts of this person within this moment and like how it makes you feel and how those people talked about it. And so it's more important that you're putting an idea that comes from your perspective than it is to come up with an idea that no one's ever thought of. Because that's very hard.
Yeah.
That's not something people just do, hence the concept.
You know, it is actually kind of funny. I was talking about this recently with my husband because I try very hard, like, not to steal ideas. So it's weird because, I mean, what you're saying is true. Like, basically every idea has been done, so just don't even, like, think like that. But I won't, like, I don't know, watch Lord of the Rings and copy it beat for beat because that's what I want to do.
Right.
And I try to pull inspiration from little things. So, like, most of my stories that I've written or been interested in or whatever have either been really dumb thoughts that I've had, or they've came from dreams, or the other one is like, I'll hear a line from some movie or TV show, and normally it's like a throwaway line, but it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Okay. And then I'll think about it and I'll be like, I could write something, you know, kind of with that maybe in it or like based as a concept or whatever. And essentially that's where I come up with my ideas, which is the weirdest way of
My latest
that.
idea came from a meme, so that's fine. Don't be ashamed where inspiration came from.
Yeah.
I was just meaning more or less like to immerse yourself in whatever you're doing.
Right.
Because with my writing project, someone had recommended a book to me based on the meme that I posted. And so I started reading that book. And it was in the same vein of like what I'm writing, but mine isn't the same thing. Like, mine is completely different, but the same elements. Like, I'll just say it's supernatural stuff. So it's like monsters, vampire, like that kind of idea. But then, you know, I'm not watching Twilight and trying to do that. Like, there's so many different ways to take this topic and to just immerse yourself in whatever you want. Just to keep it in your mind, if nothing else. Like, not necessarily to get ideas, but just like, you're always in that mindset. You're always sitting in that world that you're writing a part of.
Yeah. I definitely find that it's helpful to read other books if you can. I mean, sometimes it's hard, obviously, like for this, if we're really into writing, you know, maybe that doesn't happen as easily. But if you can, like, I find that it's very helpful, especially to read authors that are very good, which I know that sounds weird and conceited and all this kind of stuff, but like, I get a lot of inspiration from reading authors that are very good. So I think one I had like very early on my list was Jane Austen, you know, Pride and Prejudice, this and that. We've talked about this before, but one of the things I love about her writing style is she is so witty. Like, you read her stuff, and it's like, it just, all the dialogue makes perfect sense perfectly all the time, which is just crazy. So I get a lot of inspiration from listening to the audiobook or whatever, listening to Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility, because I find that listening to that style of talking is helpful to me. It gives me ideas, like, about how I could, you know, be talking and have my characters be talking.
Right.
So.
And then on top of all this, everyone has their unique things, as you will. Like, for me, I almost exclusively write at night. Don't know why. I think it's because I'm resetting for the day, and it almost, like, releases my brain. Because, like, I tell stories to put myself to sleep. And so with me writing it, it's like a precursor to me putting myself to sleep. So I do that, and I listen to this, like, trance electric music on repeat. That's my thing. Like, and I found out I can have one drink and I'll still be good and be writing usually better. Like, usually one drink is just enough to get me over, like, the ADHD or anxiety or whatever you want to call it, my obsessive perfection personality. So more than one drink, I wouldn't say is a bad thing for me. I don't really get drunk. Not that I can't, just that I don't do that. But I usually end up just buying a bunch of books instead of whatever task at hand that I was doing. But you need to find your comfort routine. I think most writers and most people have that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's just mine personally, is dark music, maybe a drink.
Yeah, and I mean, it is definitely different for everybody, and it depends on what your goals are too. So, I mean, I write because I enjoy it. I write because, you know, like I said, maybe someday I would love to have a novel be published. So, like, my goal is to write as consistently as possible, as much as I can. I don't know if I'll ever have a novel published, but I feel like this is the best way
This is
to
how
get
to go about it.
however long that takes. Maybe 20 years from now, I'll be like, hey, I did it. Look at this.
You'll have one published and then just bam, bam, bam. You'll be like, I have like 20 just sitting around people.
I'll be an interesting age. I'll be an interesting age, but I guess that's fine for being a writer.
Yeah.
To be honest, nobody cares.
No.
I don't care about most authors of books. But what I was going to say is I'm a little bit opposite of Julie. I mean, I write throughout the day. I will write later in the day, but I will say I mostly write in the morning. Part of it is I am the kind of person where I like to get up before I go to work and do things, which I know is kind of strange. I know that not everybody's like that. Part of the reason why I do that is because I find that it makes me happier. I don't like waking up and then immediately going to work. There's something about it that just really bums me out. So I found that, like, if I wake up, if I do something that's, like, for me, and then I go to work, like, I feel happier. So I'll get up, I write for a little bit, go to work. Maybe when I come back, I'll write more. On the weekends, I'll probably write more than that. But, like, one of the other things, too, part of the reason why I write more in the morning than I do the afternoon is I just find that I'm more productive. There's something about me in the morning where I am less mean to myself. I'm more willing to just, like, write stuff down. I don't think about things as much.
Yeah, we're reversed. If I tried to do it in the morning, I'd be raged. Like, just, what the fuck is this? Like, just, I love sleep. So I'm the opposite. I wait until the possible last minute to get out of bed and get ready to go to work. And I immediately go to work. If I have something where I wake up and have like an hour before I need to leave, I am impatient the entire time. Because I'm like, I'm going to be late for work because I'm going to get caught up in something. I'm going to forget to go to work. Like, even though I wouldn't do that, like, that's just what I think. So then I just go to work early. I'm like, well, going to work. Like, I
mean, my husband, he's the same way. Like, he doesn't like to get, I know that I'm very weird for doing this. It's just, for whatever reason, I'm just much more of a productive person in the morning. In the afternoon, it's like a wash.
Well, that's me at work. Like, at work, I get everything done, like, as soon as I get there. And then if you're trying to do something with me at noon, I'm brain dead. I'm like, this is spent. Like, this, I'm a morning person by trade. Like, that's just high energy to nothing. But to me, like, the hobbies are how I relax. So then I can't be in that mindset. I can't be in that hyper mindset. I have to be a little down.
I wouldn't say that I'm hyper.
Well, no,
It's
I just meant, like, I am in the morning, so I can't do anything I enjoy.
Yeah, it's just, I think for me, it's just more of like a way to do something that I want, something that makes me feel better. I mean, back before I was writing, I would do other things. Like, I don't know, maybe like I'd watch a video or something. But now it's, I write. It makes me feel better. And also, the other thing for me, because of this whole goal that I have, I write every day, no matter what. And I basically have done that. I did go on vacation somewhat recently, and I didn't have my computer with me, so I kind of had to write on a notebook, which was weird. But I try to write every day, no matter what, even if it's just like 10 minutes. And part of the reason that I do that is I find consistency is really key. And it doesn't have to be you writing every day. You can make a goal to write every week, you know, whatever. It's just, for me, especially with the goals that I have, I find writing every day, even if I'm having a horrible shit day, if I can just put down like a sentence, it's better than not. So.
Yeah, with me, it's more I think about it a lot. And then I found we also have opposite problems when we write, and that my beginning and my end are choice. They're like the best parts, and I get them done first, and in the middle is me going, bleh. Like, what? I feel like I'm rambling and I hate it. Well, with what I've read from you, it's like you'll have an okay start, and your middle is choice. Like, your middle, you've got everything like going on. I don't even have to write notes. And at the end, I'm like, what happened? You were doing great.
I never really know how to end a book.
You don't.
That is true. I'm working on it. I'm working on it like even more recently because I'm trying to be better about chapters. Because that's the thing I've had issues with too, is like how to end a chapter.
Yeah.
Because I like telling stories, but I think like I naturally don't like some of the ways that people structure stories, which is essentially like, here's a thing, cliffhanger. Here's a thing, cliffhanger. Like, that's kind of the way that people set up most chapters. It is like you're supposed to end on essentially something that's a cliffhanger. And I'm like, what is the cliffhanger of this chapter? That's what you always have to ask yourself. What is the cliffhanger of this chapter? And then you end right before you answer some question. You never answer the question.
See, it's just really, we literally have opposite problems. And that's why it's just so funny and why we make a good pair in a lot of ways. Because, like, I already know how every chapter, rhythm-wise, is supposed to go. So ending a chapter is super easy for me. Everything, like, it's just the meat. Like, I don't know what to do in the middle. I'm like, I just want to end it. I want to start it and end it. I don't care about the middle.
Because I'm like, fuck, where's my sandwich?
I end, like, 5 chapters with her cussing about food. Like, and that's perfect to me. I'm like, this is what the people want. Like, this is what, and how I'll do a rhythm throughout the books where it's like, every odd chapter has those cliffhangers that you want, and every even chapter has the, like, peaceful, like, there's a resolution to this. Mm-hmm. And so I have those in my head. And then with you, like I said, you have the opposite problems where, like, your rhythm, I'm always like, what are you doing? Like, your rhythms throw me off, and then I have to, like, I'll write in how to, like, the cadence of the sentence irritated me, and I put in, like, a notes that I'm like, I don't know why I need to do that, but that's, so we have opposite problems, and what I have to do to help me with my problems is I have to have an outline after I start it. I can start it, like the first 50 pages, I know exactly every word and where it's supposed to be and how it's done. After those first 50, I'm like, okay, now to the last 50. Like, I don't give a fuck about the 100 in the center. Like, it's just, so I have to write outlines after and before, like, after the beginning and before the ending. That says every chapter, what is the point of this chapter? What am I trying to accomplish? And then try not to write words like, it's filler, I don't know. Fuck this chapter.
Yeah. So I do another thing that's really weird too. I have done outlines before. Sometimes I don't do outlines. I don't know. It just kind of depends. I'm still like kind of learning, basically. I wouldn't like I think I said this at the beginning. If I didn't say this at the beginning, I'm not an expert. I'm just giving you some tips of things that I've found that works. But one of the things that I tend to do is I tend to write like the first 10 chapters or so, and then kind of like meander around in those first 10 chapters for a while. And I think like part of the reason why I do that is I'm trying to figure things out. Like, it's like me trying to be like, okay, like, what is this story about? What are these characters like? You know, like, and I know it sounds really weird because like I could do an outline and I could do those things, but for some reason it doesn't work as well for me as like literally going through 10 chapters and like I'll keep editing it like essentially and keep thinking about it. Like it's not just like me doing nothing. It's like I'll keep editing it, I'll change things and this and that, I'll change people's names. And it's like essentially me getting almost like a vibe check. Like I'm like, do these first 10 chapters suck or not? And if they suck, then, you know, maybe I reconsider it. And I had that happen actually somewhat recently. I don't think we talked about this, but I was writing a book all pretty much last year, I guess, and I ended up giving up on it because basically I would say it was like about the first 10 chapters or so, and I was like, I really like this idea, but I just can't write this. Like I would kind of mess around with those first 10, maybe 15 chapters, whatever it was. I think it was more like 10. And I was like, I don't see a story in this. Like, it's a great idea and I would love to come back to it someday, but maybe I'm not the person to write it. And it sucked. Like, having to give up on an idea does suck, but it got to a point, I think I had gone through like 3 or 4 rounds of it. Like changing things, being like, okay, maybe if I tweak this, then this will work, and this and that, and all, and eventually me just being like, I can't do this. Like I'm trying so hard, and it's not me. Apparently, it's not me, and I can't do it, which is rough. And I mean, even so, I mean, I know obviously that's kind of sucky advice to give to somebody, but I would give that advice to some people. Like, don't be afraid to give up on an idea. Like, not all ideas are for everybody, even if like you think it's a really good idea.
Well, the thing is, you go through different times in your life and you change, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, you'll be the right person for that story.
Right.
So like, you don't have to burn all evidence of it and forget it forever, but just decide, this isn't the right moment. I'm not that person today.
Yeah. But I think I'm also a big fan. Well, that sounds weird the way I say it, but like, you shouldn't just like force yourself to do something. Like if it literally feels like you are swallowing gravel trying to make something work.
Me and pottery.
Fuck
that wheel.
Literally.
Goddamn wheel. I thought it would be my life's calling, and I was like, I hate every second of this.
I don't know if is there anything else you want to say?
I was just going to say, like, if it helps people who can't write beginnings, how I picture beginnings to help me. Like, I think that's my strong suit is beginnings and ends, so it's like what I think I should give advice on.
I don't know how to give advice on middles.
Yeah, I'm not. Outlines, I can help you.
For me, it's like, I guess I just like the middle parts better. I don't know why. Just for whatever reason, writing beginnings and endings annoy me.
Well, what helped me with writing middles is that with my recent love of character development is trying to build that. Like, that's my purpose in the middle, is to build upon character development and, like, create mini stories. Like, it's not, to me, it was always, how do I get to the end? Like, that's what the middle was to me, was how do I get to the end? And because of that, I hated it, and like I never did a good job because I'm rushing it, and it feels like I'm rambling if I'm not rushing it. So when I changed my mindset to be the middle is about character development and short stories, like that's the point, then it became a lot easier for me to do it.
Okay. I don't know. Again, I don't really like have advice. Mine, I think it's just, for me personally, the middle is where the shit happens, because part of it just, I don't know if we're just like talking again, I guess. He has
I wondered that too, but you kept drinking, so I'm like, I guess we're chatting instead of recording, and then now we're getting serious, so I'm like, alright, it's part of it.
We're just talking. But,
fuck pottery, anyway.
Yeah, fuck pottery. Anyway, the middle to me is like the part where everything happens. So that honestly tends to be the parts that I think about the most, because the beginning and the ending, which might be more of a product because I write fantasy, the beginning and the ending to me are, you're building the world, you're like trying to wrap things up in a way. So like that's the way that I tend to think about it in fantasy, because like I know for some of the books that I was writing, the big issue that I had was I was like, well, I don't want it to take 10 chapters for it to start, but also I don't want to not talk about the world at all because it's a new world. And I feel like it's weird to just like not, but then it's like also like, I don't want to talk about it like, this is the world and this is what it looks like and these are the people in it and these are the things that happen and here's the magic system and just shove it down their throats for 2 chapters. It's more like I wanted it to be, you know, organic and natural. And so anyway, the whole point is that that's the reason why I have problems writing beginnings, is because I focus so much on like, I want it to be organic and like, yeah, the story's in there. I'm not like not telling the story, but like that's not really the purpose of the first chapters. The first couple chapters are be like, here's the world presented to you in a way, and we're gonna kind of like get into the story. And then the middle part is like this is the story.
So I see why we're opposites now, because that's not at all how I think of it. To me, the beginning is the first 50 pages. I think the average healthy fantasy, and by healthy, I mean like not Tolkien, but also not just like a short story, is about 200 to 300 pages. I think that's a good healthy spot. So to me, the first 50 pages, if I'm not interested, I won't read that fucking book. Like if you don't do something that makes me care in the first 50 pages, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to read that book. And so to me, like the beginning is so important to do 2 things. Establish your voice, however you want that to be. If that's you rotating through characters, if that's first person, if that's whatever narration from above, omnipotence, you need to establish that firmly. And the other part is to give you something interesting to pull you in. Even if it's something you resolve. Like it has to be interesting enough that someone wants to keep reading after those 50 pages. And so, like in one of the books that I was writing, the character that was telling the story is ADHD like me, because it's the easiest way for me to write, obviously. And so a lot of my voice is her just randomly having a different thought. And I had to figure out how to put that in a way that's not confusing. Because it can easily get confusing where you're like, so I was waiting for this person to tell me, but pizza. Like, you can't just do that. You have to find a way to get your rhythm and the cadence for people to understand what you're doing. So you slowly kind of step into that where they get used to it. And then the ending is the point to me. The ending is, why are we here? We came here for the end. That is the whole point of this, is to get this ending done. So that's why you were easy to do the middle, because you're like, this is the point. This is what we're doing. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
The middle is just fodder to get to the end. Like, I don't care about it.
But to be fair, I feel like that is kind of more how fantasy is written. I mean, yes, okay, there are some fantasies that do have good endings. I'm not going to say that. But, like, I would feel like, maybe besides Harry Potter, but Harry Potter's kind of weird. I almost sometimes don't even put Harry Potter in fantasy. It is a fantasy. I'm not saying that it's not.
Real people.
It's just, it's more like I guess I'm saying it's not high fantasy, like Tolkien, you know, that kind of stuff. It's more like, it is like a high school mystery is probably where you would more put Harry Potter. So yeah, normally the ending is important in Harry Potter, but like a lot of fantasies, I feel like the ending's like a soft pat on the back. Yeah.
Like you have right towards the middle, between the middle and the end, you have the actual like big showdown or resolution or whatever. And then the last chunk, like 50 to 30 pages, would be more epilogue, more of a wrap up, clean up, telling you what happened because of the big event, more or less. But I think the other reason is that I think of endings the way I do is because I typically don't just write one thing. I'm writing 3 books conceptually, or like a series of shows, or it's never just over with the first one. So to me, you have to have that big pop moment. And then I would talk about like the results of that in the next sequence. And to me, that's just like makes more sense. If I'm only writing one book, then yeah, I would agree with the whole, you have the big event and then you talk about why that event mattered. And that makes perfect sense. But Just not how I do it.
Basically, what you're saying is we need to swap these.
Yeah,
at
we'll
some
just
point.
say, here's the book. I did the beginning and the end. You do the middle, and then I'll take yours and be like, I'm going to write a bitchin' beginning and ending. Which I do remember when you gave me the last book you wrote. I felt so bad because, like, I read your beginning, and it took me forever because I wrote in just as many notes as the chapters were, and I'm like, how am I going to tell Krista I had such a hard time getting through this? But as soon as I got to the beginning, it was great. Like, the middle, I wrote barely any notes. Mine is just little ticks and things. But the beginning, I was like, God damn.
Yeah, to be fair, I had a hard time with the beginning.
Yeah.
I liked it. So I wrote like I was saying earlier, I wrote a novella, and I liked my novella a lot better in terms of that kind of stuff. Like, I thought it made sense. I think I still didn't really like my ending as much. I mean, it wasn't bad.
Your ending
It's
straight
just-
up pissed me off. I think
That
I
was
even
fair.
wrote, I was like, God, what the fuck?
It was purposefully a cliffhanger in that one.
It wasn't that you did that. It was like your second to last chapters when everything happened, and they're like, the characters are running away. So you know, like, that it's going to end kind of there. Like, you know that you're not going to have some big resolution suddenly one chapter. But you completely changed your tone. And that's what made me mad. You went from, like, oh my gosh, everything's happening, to they're suddenly in a peaceful city. Let's talk about that city today, people. And I'm like, what? I don't give a shit about the fucking city. Like, this should be in the next, what the fuck? Like, they were running for their lives, and now they're talking about some goddamn bender, like, hanging out.
No, it's cool. I mean, to be honest, like, that's the kind of feedback that I want, really, because I am still learning. Like, that's what I said. Like, I wouldn't say I'm perfect at this at all. I think I did better in my novella, which, by the way, if I didn't explain this earlier, a novella is basically like a short story. It's longer than like a traditional short story. That would be, I don't know, like 10 pages or something. It's probably more like 50 pages. That's a novella. But I thought I did like a better job, especially with the beginning and kind of the progression. The only thing I still didn't really like about it was my ending, because I just wasn't sure how to end it. Like, I felt like I ended it in a place that I thought was appropriate, but it was also kind of one of those where it was like, how do I end this? Like, where should I stop?
If you literally just cut that last chapter, that would have been fine to end it there. That's how I felt.
Note taken.
Like, because it was obvious this was part of a series. Like, towards when you're halfway through, you can usually tell if a book's going to be a series or if it's going to be just one book. So I knew it was going to have, like, some sort of ending that wasn't totally resolved. Just the last chapter made me so mad. I was like, the tone changed. Like,
Fair.
why'd you get me amped up and then just do this to me?
I'll have you be my editor. Next time, because I mean, I am writing another book, actually. You know, maybe we could end here, unless you have any more advice.
I'm a good editor, because as much as it sounds like I'm being mean, I'm just very, like, this is what I feel like happened. Like, I'm never actually mean. I'm just critical and kind of give you, like, honest opinions when I do stuff. So for anyone that thinks I'm bullying Krista right now, like, my mom thinks I bully you all the time. So
no, we'll just have to trade stuff. When you write your thing, I'll read it and I'll critique your middle, and then you can critique my beginning and end. Or I mean, you can also critique my middle. You don't have to
know shit about the middle.
You don't read the middle.
No, I was with one of the things I was writing. It was a true story that I was asking people for romance, like, advice, just like, tell me your perfect first date or whatever, and got all that weird ass feedback. And I literally told people, like, that's shit, I can't use that. Why are you telling me this? And I made a bunch of decisions about this romance I built, and I decided to make one of my friends, who's a diehard romantic, I was like, just read this section. And she's like, why would you do this to me? I'm in love with that man. And I was like, well, that is the point. She's like, you're going to kill him, aren't you? I'm like, duh. That's the whole point. I want you to be in love with him, so it's soul crushing. She's like, I fucking hate you. Like, thanks for helping.
I'm glad you did your part. Okay. What I was going to say is what we are actually going to be writing for NaNoWriMo, whatever.
Nah.
So for me, I am currently working on a book. I wouldn't say that I'm too far in it, so I don't think it'll really matter. I could easily add another 50,000 words to it. So I'm going to keep writing that. Essentially, the plot of what I am going to be writing is it's going to be a mystery of sorts surrounding the disappearance of a princess, which I know sounds very generic, but I don't know, it just really interests me and it called to me. And so like, I think Julie's kind of talked about this a little bit here and there. I like a lot of character development type things. That is another thing that I do like too. And I especially like that in terms of this book. Like, I think it has the central cast that I've made for this, I think is very interesting. And I am just excited to progress them. And I hope it'll end up somewhere really good. I do have a very clear, like, where I want it to end up. And I've outlined steps throughout. Basically, like, for anybody who hasn't written a mystery, it's like the steps to get to the answer of the mystery. That is
Colonel
what it
Mustard in the library.
Yeah. So I've like written out that part of it, like here, this will happen, that will be this part of the mystery, that will be this and this and this and this to the end, basically.
Right. So what I'll be working on is what I've been referring to quite a lot in this episode, just because it's like my most recent project, so it's the most recent one, like, in my brain. And that's kind of a twist on typical supernatural ideals. And like I said, it came from a meme. It was essentially a meme that said, you know, I'm so sick of the tropes where, like, vampires or no, werewolves are possessive and, like, you know, territorial, while vampires are, like, creepy and edgy and sexual. I want someone to write about, like, a derpy vampire or, like, just stupid shit. Like, it was just a meme. And I just went, that is interesting. And I came up with my own concept of, like, it's a current world novel where basically a character from our world finds out that everything we know about supernatural beings is completely fucking bullshit. And she's, like, immersed in the world of them and learns about, like, what they are really today in this realm, more or less. And it's supposedly going to be a 3-part book series that I want to do if I ever get there. And I'm working on it specifically because I wanted to finish a writing project this year. Just one. Like, I don't care what it is. Because I have so many just started. Because I'm good at beginnings. And I got caught up in the end. So this one, I wrote the beginning already. And I think I'll need more than 50,000 words. So I don't think I'll finish it specifically, like, with this project. But I wrote an outline for the middle. So I should be able to keep going. And I was writing this, like, 3 hours a night for, like, a month. Like, I was really into it. And I don't remember why. It wasn't because I hit roadblock or anything. It was just, I think I got busy or, like, I was sick of my computer. I don't know what happened, but I just stopped. And this will get me to do it again. And maybe I'll finish it and reach my goal for the year.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, at the end of November, I guess we'll have to see how this all went. See if we died, see if we finished it, see what happened.
Yeah, because I wanted to start a little bit, just get my gears going, like, this month to get me back in the rhythm of it. But I have a vacation next week, so I'm not going to write then.
Well, next week, you're fine.
Yeah.
It's not till November.
Well, no, I wanted to start, though. Like, get in the habit. But I won't, like, I'll be off for a couple extra days, so maybe I'll be able to start on those off days before November starts. But, yeah. So we both write fantasy, if that wasn't obvious.
Yeah. There's been other things I've definitely been interested in writing, but I don't think it's my strong suit. It's not really, I guess, what I'm passionate about. I like reading that stuff sometimes. Like, I'm fine with reading, like, the occasional romance or, like, mystery or, you know, stuff that's not explicitly fantasy, but it's just when it comes to writing, it's like, no, I want to make a really immersive world, and I want to make really interesting characters and, like, talk about knights and magic and shit, so...
I love realms that have just a smidge of magic. Like, it's almost the same as today's world, but just a tweak. And that's what I tend to do and what I tend to write and enjoy. This is a bad way to say it, but I feel like I'm not smart enough to write realistic nonfiction or whatever you want to call it. Like historical fiction, those kinds of things. I'm just like, that's a lot of research. I already have to do research just for the fantasy shit I make up. Like, so now I have to do realistic research so that people can shit on me when I get it wrong. Like, that's too much.
I do sometimes like writing, well, I mean, I guess I haven't written an explicit mystery. The one that I wrote, the novella that I've been talking about, that was like a mystery / fantasy. But I think I could be interested in writing a mystery. Mysteries are actually kind of fun if you've never written one before, because basically you figure out what the ending is, and then you just like go backwards from there. You like set up timeline and like it makes you feel like you're like a serial killer or something. Or I guess probably more like an investigator. But then you go and you like it's like you build up outline backwards and then you just write around it. Like it honestly almost doesn't matter what your characters are like. I mean, it's cool if you can have characters that are good, but it's like essentially just like, here it is. You just do the thing, and it's like it's really kind of easy.
Yeah.
From that perspective, at least.
I could probably write one of those.
Okay, so that's what we're gonna do, and we'll check back in. We'll check back in.
We'll let you know how it went, I guess. We'll probably just do a cold opener where, like, our first recording in December, be like, fuck! Thank God it's over.
I'm so tired.
I hate my computer and my life.
And then, you know what? Maybe if people are interested, maybe we'll share them. Who knows? You know, I don't know if that's a way to get engagement. Our 12 listeners, it seems like we've got like 10 consistent ones now. So maybe one of those 10 will be like, hey, I'll read your shit.
I've had people ask me to read your stuff, and I'm like, well, it's not mine, so like, I'm not gonna give it to you. Like, that's kind of rude.
It is kind of weird.
Yeah, like, but I'll be saying something like, when I was reading your novel, people are like, what are you up to today? I'm like, critiquing a novel. They're like, what? Are you an editor now? I'm like, no, it's my friend. Can I read? No.
That's weird.
It's not mine. I can't just give it to people. Like, if I'm editing it as a non-professional, like, clearly it's not published right now. Like, what do you think I'm doing?
I still feel kind of weird about sharing that one, but I think like for this next one, I think I'm better about it. Honestly, I could even share my novella too, because I don't know if anything's ever going to happen with my novella. Because novellas are kind of weird to get published. They're like too short, essentially, to be treated as a normal book.
It seems like something that would get published if you had a book published. Yeah. Like if people liked your book and then someone found that laying around, they're like, publish this thing. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, for me, it's essentially too short. Because it's, like I said, it's like 50 or 60 pages, something like that. So it's like, that's not really a novel.
So it'll be 100 pages.
Yeah. I'll just add 40 pages of nothing at the end.
Like how they did in the series of unfortunate events, where it's just like 10 black pages, or like pages that would just say never, ever, 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 like for 3 pages.
That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My husband said that he liked it. The only thing that he said is he was like, this could have been longer. And I was like, yeah, it could have, but I was purposefully...
That wasn't the point.
I was and actually I failed, because I think a novella is like under 50 pages. And I was like, but I was trying really hard, and this was the best that I could do.
This was Passion for Your Passions with Julie
and Krista, where we talked about writing and storytelling for National Novel Writing Month. NaNoWriMo.
NaNoWriMo. On the next episode, we're talking about sheep. Beep, beep. The jelly's teasing me, you bitch. When I think there's resistance, I'm like, yes, and then I chug, and then there's nothing. I'm gonna make myself sick, because I need jelly.